didn't realize the seat I was in that I was getting up first. But kia ora koutou, my name is Haley. I am a PhD student at the University of Canterbury, very interested in the regenerative space. For quite some time now, I've just wanted something that I wanted to be around a community of people that spoke the same language, that understood things from the soil up, and of human beings that were just very connected to how we can move things forward in a positive way. My project specifically focuses on regenerative agriculture and how it's being communicated into the marketplace. So sort of what values are being translated, how things are being moved and communicated between different people. And I feel really fortunate to be here, be a part of Future Whenua. Thanks, Danielle, for sharing that this beautiful community is here, and thanks for putting this on. And I'm also a future farmer now as well, so I'm stoked about that. So thanks, and I'm glad to meet everyone. I've had some great conversations so far, and I'm looking forward to meeting those who I don't know yet. Thanks.
And feel free if there's any ask of the crowd as well to name that.
Okay, kia ora koutou, nā Nathan Surendra. I did a little bit of an introduction yesterday, so I won't go over that. I will say that I've got a background as an engineer, recovering from that. But specifically what it's given me is a bit of a focus on energy systems and the bigger picture of energy. And, regeneration, to my mind, and in that context, with that lens, if you like, is about understanding that whatever we do going forward, it has to use less energy. We will be moving around less, we will be potentially eating less, certainly for a while, if we're not careful. And I want to just think about that mountain over there as an example of what the historic and future consumption of fossil fuels looks like. So typically when you have a finite resource, you start using it, your rate of use increases to some maximum level, and then it starts to go back down. And if you can imagine the profile of the mountain, obviously you can't see the right hand side of it there behind the tree, but that overall shape, and it's kind of bumpy up slope, and it'll be a little bit of a bumpy down slope. What we've done since there was a lot of talk about peak oil and so on back in the 2000s, which the shale revolution in the United States and so on seems to have taken the attention away from that, is we've continued the upslope. It hasn't changed the amount of mass underneath the curve, and so if you imagine taking that mountain and reshaping it so that we can extend it upwards into the sky, what we're doing is we're taking mass from the area on the downslope side, and so we go up further, but there's less mass available, so the downslope will be steeper. And that's just the fundamental physical reality of the world that we're in at the moment and the place that we are. So the ask, I guess, for this conference from me is just have that context in mind, because nothing that we do will change that reality. That is just a fundamental physical fact of life and of the point at history that we're at. We've built a whole civilization around the use of that finite resource. We've built up and up and up and up, and the downslope will be steep, and that implies certain things in terms of how we approach regenerative activities. So that's my ask, is consider that more. Okay, what else to say? I've just come from I'm just finishing up an 18-month stint with Fonterra as an engineering project manager. I've been trying to bring some of this thinking into that organisation. It's had hits and misses, but one thing that came out of the recent problems with the gas supply, as another example of this, is a statement from the global technical lead within the organisation, a guy called Chris Kane, who said that they were surprised by how quickly the market had reacted. That surprise is based on not paying attention to the fundamentals. Back in 2000-ish, you could take the MB documentation. There's a spreadsheet that they publish of proven resources and how that's depleting over time, and then energy like gas consumption. You can do a little bit of a conversion, and compare the two and go, oh, that's probably about 10, 12 years of gas left at current rates of extraction, and assuming that we can maintain those rates. So, you know, I wasn't surprised, and it's something that it's not difficult to understand if you take a little bit of time. I think a lot of people, when they think about the big picture of energy, you can get into a whole lot of complex discussion around demand profiles and projections and so on, and it misses stepping back from it, taking that, you know, 50,000 foot view of the overall system and thinking about, okay, well, what are the fundamentals here? And, you know, I have an off-grid house. You know, I've installed a solar system with batteries. We've run it for the last few years, learned a lot through that process. But, you know, I'm not saying that we shouldn't use those systems, right? They are there. They may, if they're properly implemented, soften the landing. But for example, and this is another, I guess, thing I'll leave you with, think about if you're going to implement a technological solution, will it degrade gracefully over time? So actually, as the high-tech components of that system fail, like for example on a PV system, the inverters have a sort of 7 to 10 year life expectancy, and then you have to replace certain components in the board. Can you actually pull it apart, and is it actually one that you can maintain and repair? If the system, if the components are cheap enough, do you have some in stock so that you can repair it, or find someone? You know, you don't necessarily have to be able to do the soldering yourself. Like, there's plenty of people, you know, in the broader community who could do that. But another example is if that stuff over time eventually becomes unavailable, I can run my PV system, drop a panel out of the string, and actually get down to a voltage that my nickel iron batteries, which is like 100-year-old battery technology, where I can use wood lye to make electrolyte for it, actually can be charged directly from the solar with just a simple contactor, you know. So again, the question is then, well, what appliances you're expecting to run at that point, because, you know, are they even going to be available, and should you even be thinking in that way, you know? So just thinking in a different way about the types of technologies you're applying, and actually that idea of can they degrade gracefully is an interesting thought to leave you with. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Roger Robson Williams aho, kei te mahi o ki Rangaho Aho Marakai, Plant and Food Research, Chief Sustainability Officer. Tokomahi, I'm Roger. I'm the CSO, the Chief Sustainability Officer at Plant and Food Research. And so my two immediate asks is, one, don't hate me because my underpants aren't very sustainable. And secondly, don't hate me because I'm in a corporate sustainability role. I'm not remotely interested in making plant and food research look good. I am somewhat interested in trying to make it better, but I'm not super interested, to be honest, even in that. What I'm really interested in is what role can science play in holding open the possibility that future generations of humans can prosper. And when I talk about prospering, as I'm sure all of you do, I'm thinking about health and well-being and opportunities for meaningful work and education and gender equality, and all of those kind of things. And clearly one component of achieving that is to do with money. And I've got a particular thing at the moment about growth and economic growth, and seeing that as an end in itself, I think, is exceedingly dangerous. And I'm putting a great deal of effort in the work context in trying to help the leaders in the science system understand that we're here to support future prosperity, and one route to that might include economic growth, but it's not an end in itself. And I've got a particular problem with people in positions of leadership who can't kind of get their head around the fact that nowhere on the planet has anybody managed to meaningfully decouple economic growth from social and environmental harm. And so particularly for a science organization to say we're here to grow the economy is so kind of intellectually incoherent and problematic for me. And we don't even need to go there if we talk about holding open this future prosperity for humans and non-human creatures that we share the planet with. And so I was really interested in Rose's suggestion that we don't tackle the big boulders, because and I get why, and I think I'm probably going to wear myself out trying to do this, but that feels like a big boulder that I need to push on at the moment. But one of the things that relieves the pressure is the work that Melissa and I are doing at home, trying to build the future that we want, as well as trying to avert the future that we don't want. And I'm sure you will have spoken to people and talked a little bit about what that looks like. But picking up on the energy discussion, what does it mean to have a bit of energy sovereignty, to have the capacity to support our neighbours, to do the vacuuming in this future, should anybody want to do the vacuuming, for example. So benefiting from the fact that we've got a bit of capital we can invest in that infrastructure, not everybody does, we've got some space to put panels up. So what does that look like? How can we combine that with an electric tractor? We're getting an old Kubota tractor converted to battery electric for three reasons really. One is to extend our capacity to store energy. Another is to provide us with a mobile energy source that if the Alpine fault goes, we could trundle down into Oxford and people can plug in their barista machines or whatever seems relevant at that moment in time maybe. And thirdly, so that we can do stuff on the property without having to burn fossil carbon for very obvious reasons. Melissa's very green-fingered. We grow a lot of our own food. We haven't really found a satisfactory way of sharing that in a meaningful way at the moment, so that's something we kind of want to work on. And the reason I mention that is, along with the energy, this sense of building community and being part of community is going to be so important in the future, because however you look at it, things are going to get a bit sticky, and being in community and supporting one another I think is going to be so important. And one of the wonderful things, and thanks so much for organising this for me, and I know for Melissa as well, with these kind of events, is to get out of the pretend world of economic growth and corporations that we pretend are human beings or at least have the same rights, to get into the real world of biophysical stuff, the limits to growth, the wonder of growth, and all that we see around us, and people that feel the same way. And I really, although I'm actually not very extrovert, I get a lot of energy from being on my own. I do get a lot of energy from being around people like you, and not having to be guarded about this stuff, and actually being able to live in the real world rather than in this fantasy world that the advanced economies have created. Thank you.
Kia ora everyone, I am Chanel O'Sullivan and I don't know where to start. I kind of eat, breathe and live this space of regenerative farming and beyond. And it's interesting, the conversations already, which is going to be exciting, is that I work in the space of marketing, specifically around amplifying the stories of regeneration. We're fully off grid and love that. We grow most of our own food and live in the mountains where no one can find us with a 50 square metre greenhouse. And then Delia Hill will be coming up. We are building with straw and clay and things from local resources. So there's a few different aspects there. Overall, my business is called Harvested, and the idea is that to use that funnel to connect people through existing connections, I suppose, in the space of regenerative farming and beyond. So I work with companies such as Quorum Sense as the marketing and support lead. I work with the Whenua Hamanu project, which is Massey University and Lincoln, doing regen trials up in Palmerston North, and quite a number of other things. Oh, we have a savoury hub, I should probably mention that. So lots of different fingers and different pies, which is very exciting. And then at home, again, similar to what you were saying, is that we do kind of that advocacy and support work as work, and then at home we live and breathe what we talk about and are developing. So yeah, we've been, and Dave will speak later, developing regenerative stations, including this one, about 5 years ago. And we've kind of gone from there to another place to finally doing it for ourselves, which was always the goal. and that includes doing everything with cash and bit by bit and slowly. And our next vision is how to integrate regenerative tourism into what we're developing, and that's around potentially purchasing a property alongside of us, which is in this big beautiful native valley full of wetlands, and using local materials to build earth-built cabins up there, and to have people be able to walk into a regenerative farming system, be able to be in the mountains, harvest food, eat local, and create the experience that we get to live and see every day, and that people say, "You're so lucky, I wish we had the ability to do that," not knowing how horrifically stressful it has been to get to that point. And then how do we share that with others to help inspire what is possible? So yeah, that's kind of like, I feel like I've missed a million things because I'm a very much multi-potentialite, must know a bit about everything. But yeah, if I can ever offer connections or support or introduce you to different people that you require for different uses, not in a user way, then I'm very happy to be that connector and person, because I've been very lucky to be well connected in this space across the industry. So yeah, I will probably leave it there.
Just in our website, you've also got Chanel to thank for that.
Kia ora koutou, my name is Delia Bellaby, and I am passionate about people and the planet, and always have been, and for that reason I decided to become an architect when I was, a teenager. I've been a practicing architect for 25 years, and in that time I've done some really environmentally destructive things. I've learnt my craft building buildings for people that do not deserve to have the buildings that they have, and they've used materials and done things that I don't agree with. And so 15 years ago I decided I had to get out of the world of being under the control of other people's direction in terms of what they felt architecture was, and I started my own practice. And that's been a big journey of kind of figuring out what is meaningful to me and why I became an architect in the first place, and that is as a kind of a creator of space and an informer of what society can be, and and creating spaces and communities that people should be thriving in. And so on that journey I've also become passionate about natural building, earth building. So for the last 2 years I've had the very glorious moniker of being the chair of the Earth Building Association of New Zealand. And that EBANS is a network group from owner builders, engineers, architects, anybody that's interested in actually thinking about what we've done for thousands of years in the creation of shelter and community, which is digging in the ground and growing materials and finding materials that we create shelter with. And so there's like this ancient knowledge and unifying factor in the fact that we've always used these materials in our local environment to kind of create our community and our homes. And EBANS is really dedicated to empowering people to continue to do that, even though we exist in a very commodified environment for building. And so we have really focused in the past on testing of materials, being able to put a spade in the ground, find your clay, make sure that clay is going to work and perform the way you want to. We've developed the first set in the world of recognised legal standards in natural building to empower people to do that. My mandate as the chair is to actually start to use that knowledge to actually influence the mainstream, rather than just sort of focusing on a small percentage of people that have the capacity to do their own building, actually going, well, how can we influence the other 98%, which is where the challenge is happening. And I think here in Aotearoa we have real potential to be able to use that as a change-making space. I completely agree with what Rose was saying, that this is a small-scale environment with strong community, beautiful landscape, shit tons of resource that we could really nurture and use in a positive way. The amazing thing about earth and building systems is that they are built by community and they build community, and they've been doing that for thousands of years, and they've got real potential to do that transformation. So yeah, my passion and the passion of my organisation is to inform and educate and inspire people to do things differently, and not get too stultified by the systems and the bureaucracy and all the things we have to kind of do, like address that, but like you say, push that aside and just get on with doing the mahi, So anyone that wants to be part of that journey or have some support from us in terms of doing those things, yeah, get in touch.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Eleanor. Where to start? I guess I was kind of into the environmental space growing up as a teenager. Like, the biggest problem that was being talked about was climate change, and largely through a discussion of like decarbonisation. And I couldn't see how the solution was solving the solution that was being talked about the most was solving the problem. Like, everyone was, decarbonisation, like, we're going to get huge wind farms and solar panels and then we'll all be fine. And I was like, I think there's more to it than that, as big as the energy problem is. I was listening to a podcast and I heard Ellen MacArthur talking about the circular economy, and it was a bit of like an epiphany moment around like that we did design the economy that we have, that it's very extractive, but that we can actually have, and we have had economies that are not like that and that are much more circular, and that take into account all those planetary boundaries and that cycle things through systems and that prioritise distribution rather than like centralisation, and not necessarily efficiency but also redundancy. So I went and worked at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation for 4 years, and I guess that's where I came across like food systems work. I was involved in like trying to persuade corporates that maybe their sustainable food or fibre policies were not enough, again, to solve this many-faceted problem that we have. So what we talked about was regenerative farming. But I must be honest, I didn't know that much about it, and I just was saying that it's not enough to keep the status quo, that you have to be regenerating, and we pointed them towards, I guess, many other frameworks like the global farm metric system, if anyone's looked at that. But I had never met a regenerative farmer at the time. I was advising corporates on something I didn't know about, so I left, and Dan and I have spent the last year and a half sailing here and then being here, and we've tried to visit different regenerative farms and people working in this space, and that's, I guess, what's brought me here today.
Kia ora koto. I'm Anna Palliser, and I've got two hats on that I introduced yesterday. One was teaching sustainable food systems papers. Huh? Can you not hear me? One was teaching sustainable food system papers at Southern Institute of Technology, and the other is working with Murihiku Kai Collective, which is an organisation based in Invercargill trying to help to build a local food system through Murihiku, Southland. And what I'd like to do in my time here is just share my dream, one of my dreams. So I did some work in America, and what I found was young people who had no family connection to land or farming or growing food were managing to lease spaces from often retiring farmers who would lease them a few hectares of land, and they were growing food, and that food was being sold. They were peripheral to the city, and that food was being sold in the city, in the markets and spaces in the city. And I would love to see that happening here, and I don't think it's impossible at all. And I think it's needed, because a lot of the farmers markets, in fact I think all of the farmers markets around Aotearoa are struggling to get small local farmers to sell on at their markets, and there's all sorts of handicaps. There's some boulders, legislative and policy boulders, but actually we could just do it, you know. We could just get a whole heap of farmers saying, okay, we'll give these kids a chance, usually young people who are really willing to put themselves out there. We could get it advertised that it is an avenue, because a lot of young growers, or what potential growers, don't actually know that's an avenue. They think you've got to be on farm or have some connection to farm to actually get there. So if they knew there was an avenue and they could try it without massive risk, financial or whatever, I think we could see that happening across the whole Motu. So that's all I want to say really. I have a dream, make it come true.
Hi everybody, my name's Karma Buell. Can you hear me at the back there? Maybe? Okay. So I'm from Taranaki. I have a farm where I'd be really keen to have young people, or anyone of any age actually, who needs access to land. So, you know, if there's anyone who is interested in doing that in Taranaki, come and have a chat to me. In the 1880s, my great-grandfather, Albert Burwell, arrived in New Zealand. He was about 19 years old, and after a couple of years of working on a local farm in Taranaki and saving up some money, he bought a square mile by a mile at Kaimata, and it was towering tawa, rata, rimu forest with lots of wetlands, with lots of kahikatea, and, you know, heaps of other stuff as well. It's quite emotional to talk about. So he was writing letters to his mother and his sister back in Liverpool, which was where they were living. And we have the letters, and so he describes all sorts of boring stuff about life in New Zealand as a pioneer in the 1880s, but also some really incredible, insightful descriptions of how he burnt the forest. Detailed descriptions of how he did it, which is not an easy thing to do in a very wet rainforest. So there's a particular strategy for that. I didn't sleep much last night, so this is part of it. So he burnt the forest, and he put on sheep at first because the ground was too rough for cows, and he you know, continued to develop it. He dug many drains through the wetlands, and after a few years he was able to put on dairy cows, and he was a very good dairy farmer. He was very successful, highly respected in the community. He built the local church in memory of his wife, who died nursing people in the influenza pandemic in his later years. And then one of his sons, my grandfather George, took over the farm, and he continued with that work. He dug more drains. He cleared the last piece of forest along the river. And then my father took over the farm, and that's where I grew up. My father also continued to drain wetlands. There weren't that many left to drain by that point, but there was one that I remember him doing. So my farm has so many dead springs. The landscape of Aotearoa is littered with dead springs. And I never saw a dead spring. I didn't recognize what they were until 2009, when I was walking on my farm with Haikai, Tane, my teacher, and he started to point. Oh, there's a dead spring. Oh, there's another one. Oh, there's one over there. And I was absolutely gobsmacked, like this place that I felt I knew intimately, and I had no fucking idea what actually had gone on. Yeah. No, I sort of did actually, because when I was in my early teens, maybe 13, I used to go on big long walks on the farm, and I would cry. I would cry because of the erosion and the cuts and the gouges that I could feel. And I promised the land that I would come back and I would help it heal. Whew. But yeah, so I went off out into the world and developed a lot of very useful skills, and worked in that field. But I only came back to the farm a year and a half ago. That was the first, it felt like the first opportunity, because my father died when I was 17, and then we had share milkers, and then the farm was leased for 30 years. And the last person leasing it tried to stop us from going on the farm. So anyway, pre-COVID, as a result of being at Greg's farm and a course with Darren Doherty, that was part of the setting of the vision that actually I could interrupt what was happening on the farm and do something about it. Thank you, Greg. And so my brothers and sisters all over the world, and so we started having Skypes to vision what do we want for the family farm, and it was so powerful and so beautiful, and I couldn't believe the words coming out of their mouths. I thought I was going to be the one saying crazy things. I was like, settle down, Karma, just like play it cool, don't say anything too outrageous. And they were saying things like, we want to be a leading example of sustainable farming. I was like, what? Whoa! It was amazing. It was really amazing. Yeah. So anyway, so it's on my farm. We're just really at the very beginning, like a year and a half in. Yeah, so that's what's happening. But I really want to draw your attention to the water in the landscape. So for me, one of my biggest priorities is restoring landscape function and the watershed function. I want to restore the local water cycle, farm by farm by farm, by catchment, by region. If we do that, we can solve and address so many of the issues that we are dealing with now. Climate change, flooding, drought, all of that stuff, water quality, stream health, like everything, so many things flow from it, and it's something that so few people are speaking about. I really want to pay homage to Haikai Tāne, who's just over there. He's not far away, 20 minutes drive at the moment, and the amazing work that he has done. He has given up on us. He's given up on Homo sapiens. He's worked his whole life to be of service to the land and the water and the spirit of the land. Yeah. So anyway, whenever you have an opportunity to learn about restoring local water cycles and what that means, and what it takes to bring the springs back to life that are dead, like really, really follow that. Check it out. Really check it out. It's really beautiful and important. That's it.
Thank you for sharing that. Can't have been over it.
Hi everyone. I don't know how to follow that, but I am Enoch. I am a teenager who has never felt like a kid. I've always been slightly not quite in it in all of the communities that I've been a part of until Zeb brought me up to Mangaroa for the hui. The people that I've met in the Future Whenua Initiative, Greg, Delia, Chanel, oh my God, you guys are amazing. And I feel so connected to this group. I feel like you all really align with my values, and that's something that I've struggled to find my entire life. I'm in an interesting place because I've just finished school and I have ideas of what I want to do with myself. I know I want to have fun and I'm going to do a lot of that, but I also know that I really want to learn and grow as a person, and I want to take any opportunities that I might have to do that with the people here, to learn from you, to work for you, to help you with whatever you might need. I would love to be a part of the things that you were involved in. And yeah, I just wanted to put myself out there because you are my tribe. Yeah, that's most of what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, I'm Gloria. I wasn't originally going to speak, but part of my personality is that I can't help but say something, especially around a group of such fabulous people. I just want to acknowledge Karma, thank you so much for sharing. That emotion is so important because that perfectly encapsulates the importance of why we're doing what we're doing. So thank you for bringing that. It's, yeah, amazing. I am probably frustratingly optimistic about human potential. I would say all living species. I think we do sort of forget to include the other species, particularly the fauna. We're all pretty good. I mean, this group in particular, all pretty good at that. But we've talked a lot, Rose and I, about the opportunity that nature gives us when we give it space to flourish. And so that's a particular message that I like to bombard people with, is if you just give it space, it will do the rest. I suppose my optimism is just part of who I am, but in a personal experience for me, I grew up obsessed with whales and dolphins. I don't know what it was, but I think my babysitter showed me Free Willy when I was 3 or 4, and I'm part of a generation of kids who are now orca obsessed. I thought I was special, but there's a whole lot of us out there. Whale people have a particularly mad but beautiful energy about them. So I always knew I wanted to work in whale research, but it felt completely unattainable. Nevertheless, I sort of had that as a vision for my life. And when I got to uni, I had a lecturer who worked with a whale researcher in the Cook Islands, and I thought at the end of it, we had a whole hour of looking at whale footage, which is my perfect lecture material. So I went up at the end and said, hey, how do I get involved? And I got in contact with the researcher, who's very well known in the field. And so I thought, there's no way she'll reply to me. But she did. And after I finished my study, I went and spent a season over in the Cook Islands studying humpback whales. And I share because, first of all, the ability to realize a dream that I felt was so out of reach really fueled this sense of anything's possible. Also a little bit post experience, I was like, what the heck do I do now? Because I've achieved a goal I thought would be a lifelong pursuit. But yeah, so leaving you hopefully with a feeling that if I can do it, anyone can. The other piece is I was quite surprised, maybe a little bit disenchanted with how disconnected we are in terms of when ego gets in the way of so the better way to say it maybe is I thought going into it that all the researchers, all the scientists are working together in pursuit for a better world for whales, And so I thought there'd be a real sense of collaboration, everyone's working towards the same goal. And then I started to see all these really ridiculous examples of human ego getting in the way of goodness. And I was just shocked. You know, people were guarding data and they didn't want to share findings and all this in pursuit of being the best in the field. And so that was a key learning for me of how we can get in our own way so easily, even when we're well-intentioned. So yeah, I guess that's just a reflection and probably one to be aware of as adults, that not to let that ego piece get in the way, because it's completely it completely shuts down progress. Anyway, so I came back. I've done a few more seasons since then. Not sure what's happening in terms of Wales for me in my future, but then I had another confirmation of how powerful direction of energy and manifestation can be, because I met Rose, and I'm now doing a job again that I've wanted to do all my life, which is empowering people to feel that they can make a difference, a positive difference in the world. We work with people every day who come to us and say, I just don't see how we can change things. And I would say most of us have probably had confirmation that we have the power to change in our daily life. Some of those are bigger, has had bigger impact, some of those smaller. But I would encourage you, when you're feeling unsure or down about the future, really reflect on your life and pick out those times that you've had impact, even if they're little, because again and again you'll find that that really you can achieve anything. Yeah, and I suppose part of that, like this experience here for me, is really about recharging that energy as well, because there's a lot of negative energy out there, particularly around climate change. There's a real sense of we're all doomed, and that has been, I will say, necessary to some degree in the past in order to get people to wake up. But now it's starting to shut down the positive change because it's scary. So really about sharing messages of hope and messages of fun. We've made it so boring and scary. This is exciting. We can do anything. We are kaitiaki. We have this incredible amount of intelligence and ingenuity. And as humans, we're here to protect this beautiful planet and do it for other species as well. It's not just about us. So if we can tap into that energy, create space where we can share the energy and have fun, then I think that's really one of the most important steps we can take. So that'd be my piece. And if you want to talk about getting excited, then I can go on for hours. So I'll stop now, but thank you.
Oh. Kia ora, everyone, or Diagwith, as we say in Ireland. So yeah, my name is Topaz. I'm feeling very energized and lots of different emotions. So thank you guys so much for sharing and just for creating this space, because I think I'm very far from home, but feeling, like I said on the first day, very at home, and even more so after getting to know everyone. So yeah, I am Irish. I'm from Ireland. I'm doing my PhD back in Ireland. I'm very lucky to be able to be moving around these amazing spaces. And I'm studying environmental psychology, which is just a fancy word for exploring our relationship to nature and connecting people with the land. And that's something I'm really passionate about. I think often we use language as a barrier to sharing knowledge and sharing stories and wisdom, especially in academia and science. We wrap it up and we take ancient and indigenous knowledge and we say, this is a new theory or a new hypothesis. So yeah, I think these spaces where we can share that wisdom is really, really valuable. And yeah, I'm really, really interested in this idea of nature connectedness, which is what it sounds like. It's basically our sense of oneness with nature, how much we feel that we are part of nature. So I'm a very visual person. If you think of it like, sorry if I give anyone PTSD to maths, but Venn diagrams. So think of the two circles overlapping. It's that intersection point, where human and environmental health come together, and really how they're just, you can't separate them. They're completely, I would say, layered on top of each other. So I'm really interested in this idea of nature connectedness, the interconnectedness, and then the impact that that has on our own health and well-being, planetary health and well-being. And I think something, I guess it clicked into place for me because I've grown up in rural Ireland, middle of nowhere, we like to say. Growing up, we used to give, my parents are artists, and we used to give out to them saying, why did you bring us here? Like, there's nothing. But, you know, it's very similar actually to this environment. We have the mountains, we have the lake, and throughout my life, now I'm finding myself thanking my parents for choosing to bring us there, because that relationship to nature is something that anchors me. Anytime I'm feeling any bit lost or discombobulated, that's something I can come back to, like, no matter where I am. Even the minute I landed here, I'm so far away from home, but I could anchor myself by just connecting to that, connecting to the land. And then something that I really noticed is that I had this really strong connection to nature, and when I was a young child, and you'll see all the small people running around in the environment, they're so connected. And then as you enter school, the formal school system, particularly like secondary school, you know, teenage years, we see that it's kind of pushed out. It's not prioritized anymore. There's no real space for that anymore. And that's something I really felt from going to, you know, running around in the mountains in Ireland to then, you know, you have to put your shoes on, you have to be an adult. And I kind of found myself questioning why. Like, why is there no space for that? And why isn't it prioritized at a really important time when our values are being formed, our worldview, how we navigate the world? And then I kind of started exploring a bit of the research, and I saw that there's this thing they call the teenage dip, where we see around that age, 12 to 13, we see nature connectedness levels just dip. And hand in hand with that, mental health also dips. And it kind of got me thinking of, there's a real connection here. And just simply put, a lot of the young people, friends, younger siblings I was talking to, they feel a real sense of loneliness, you know. They're disconnected from nature, the land, but really they're disconnected from themselves. And I feel like that's the two issues we're facing at the moment, and they're very linked. So then that got me curious about, okay, this is the research, but what are young people themselves actually saying? And I think, Rose, what you were saying about asking ourselves, why are we even doing research? You know, whose research questions are getting answered, instead of just coming in with a lens and assuming this is what we might need to answer. We said, no, let's go straight to the source. Let's go straight to the young people and see what they're thinking, you know, what are they feeling at the moment? And as you'd imagine, there's a lot of overwhelm, a lot of confusion, but also a lot of excitement and passion. And things that started coming out there were these barriers to nature connectedness, where we're hearing things like, you know, I don't have access to nature. I'm living in a concrete jungle in the city. If I wanted to access it, I'd have to travel for an hour. It's not there. So that's access. And then the layers of accessibility. So also hearing kind of maybe particularly young girls, because it kind of has a gendered dimension, saying I have access to nature, but I don't actually feel safe in these environments. So kind of considering that aspect of it too, of like who can actually connect with nature and what are the barriers there. And then something really strongly which came across is this sense of time, of it's there, but I don't have enough time. And I'm looking at my parents and they're rushing from work and back. They don't have enough time to bring me. So it just struck me as the values and the prioritization just isn't there in the system. We're literally pushing it out, something that is so, so important. And we're creating that. So it got me thinking of why are we creating that, and why can't we change it and make spaces for it? So with those stories, with those narratives from the young people, we started this project, which is my PhD, Pathways to Nature, which is all about, again, finding that individual route or pathway into nature. It might look different, it looks different for every single person, but everyone has that connection to the land, whether it be through sport, through gardening, through, anything. And basically encouraging young people and carving out those spaces for them to figure that out and prioritizing it within their worlds. And I guess overcoming some of those barriers. So at the moment, we're working with 4 countries, Ireland, Spain, Armenia, and Finland, to try and work with young people and develop this program. But the idea is that we will spread it globally. So I'm very happy that I'm here and probably one of the farthest points I can be making those connections. So yeah, that is me, and thank you guys so much. And if anyone has any questions or anything afterwards, feel free to come up to me, and thank you for creating this. Thank you.
much of a public speaker, so I've got some notes, and I'll keep it brief. But yeah, firstly, thanks Danielle and thanks Zeb for organising it. Danielle invited me. I feel very inspired by everyone here. It's incredible how much knowledge there is and how much experience people have in this field, and I feel like I'm very much in the beginning of my journey in some ways. My name's Fabian. Kia ora everyone. I grew up in Wellington. I moved to Wanaka 3 years ago, and I've always been connected to the environment and to, like with your story, Kama, about the changes that have happened in New Zealand in the past and how that's been such a recent, quick, fast change, and it's had so many impacts. I feel very emotional about that topic as well, and I think that's something that I want to keep working on and bring with me into my career or whatever future I have. And I feel privileged growing up when I was younger to have a family that was involved with being activists and being raised with eating organic food and having the money to educate me and time to educate me on these issues. And I've kind of kept that up throughout my life. So when I was 17, me and my girlfriend, we went to Europe. We cycled around Europe and tried to do some travelling, as most Kiwis do, an overseas experience. And we wanted to do it in a sustainable way and have as little impact as possible. We organised with the United Nations to be ambassadors for the FCCC, and with another one called Climate Action Now, I think, from memory. And yeah, little old me in Europe, talking to ministers and organisations and companies and talking at the COP'23 was really inspiring and really something that motivated me and like threw me in the deep end of how the whole system works. And like in some ways it was really scary, and I thought, oh, what's the point? Just seems like too much, too big. But it's always been my interest and my passion, so I took it back, those learnings back with me, and went to study at Victoria University doing development studies and cultural anthropology. And I learned a lot through that as well. And then after uni I built a house truck and tried to do that in the most sustainable way possible. So the theme is kind of to reduce my own impact and figure out how I can do that and try and bring other people along and share a story that is inspiring. And I found it quite hard sometimes to connect to other people about the topics because people have their own lives and they don't really feel motivated in some ways. But being here and being amongst all of us is really inspiring and shows that people do care and people want to make a difference. And now I'm back at university. I'm studying my postgraduate diploma in sustainable management through Open Polytech because I really want to find a career and like a pathway into the future where I can still have a positive impact. And the last 3 years of me working, I've struggled to find that, and every direction seems to be something that's harming the environment. Like I worked in geotech for 8 months and it was just about developing and building, and I didn't really like that. So I think now I really want to find a pathway that is going to be positive and have a positive difference. And next week I've got an assignment due, so I'm stressing a little bit. But I've been speaking to a lot of you and I've been getting a lot of knowledge. Like my brain's like a sponge at the moment, soaking everything in. And that's what I like about being a student, I think. But one of my assignments is a big research, not PhD style, but like 8 months of research, trying to find a question that's relevant to the environmental management field and something that I can, a question that I can research or answer or discuss or whatever. And I have to involve the community and involve people or different companies and organisations, and I've been reaching out to people to ask what's a relevant question in their field to get some inspiration. So next week I have to narrow that down into a question and then write a 1,500 word document about what I'm going to be researching. So if anyone sees me or wants to chat to so if anyone wants to chat to me about what they're doing and what's something relevant in their field, something that they need answered, or something that they feel could be relevant to me as well and my story, please talk to me, and thank you.
Thanks, baby. Oh dear. Hey, you're talking. You talk so I don't have to. Kia ora koutou. Yeah, ko kakanui te mauka, ko tairi te awa, no Maniatoto ho, ko Bex Smith toku ekawa. I'm Bex, I live in the Maniatoto. My background, I grew up as an urban nomad. So I'm from an urban upbringing, and I grew up both in New Zealand and in Papua New Guinea. And then I had a dream as a child to be a vet. So throughout my whole childhood, wanted to be a vet and went to vet school after leaving high school, and graduated and moved to the Maniatoto to be a rural mixed practice vet. So did that for 14 years, and was fortunate enough in that time to meet my husband, and now I'm married to a farmer. We have a 700 hectare sheep, beef and deer farm, and we've got 3 beautiful children who you will have seen running around, one of which is Asher here. You say hi. And Millie and Emerson are just over the way. So yeah, so that's kind of the context that I come to this setting in. And what I've discovered about myself is that I have a real passion to bring people and energy together to inspire sustainable change from the ground up. And that's what I'm deeply passionate about. And so 5 years ago, I founded my first business, The Whole Story, which is focused on inspiring sustainability and empowering farmers on that journey. And it was really, for me, a selfish way to put an umbrella over everything that I did, because it was getting far too chaotic, and I needed to design a way to make sense of my life and all the projects I was involved in. So, you know, why not build a business around it, right? So we're B Corp certified, and we are a social enterprise where farmers and the land are the beneficiaries. And I guess there's a multitude of ways, and people ask, what do you do? And it's not about what we do, it's about why we do it. And so we'll do anything that allows us to achieve that mission, which to date has involved working one-on-one with farmers through, I guess, what we've termed agricultural sustainability coaching. I've got a podcast series, we've got a blog. We work with catchment groups, workshops, discussion groups, both online and in person, governance, leadership, anywhere we can to be able to achieve that why within the business. Hey. But then throughout that, I've actually discovered, I kind of like to think of it now like a farm with multiple different paddocks of Three Sisters plots. Because what's actually come to light recently is that what I'm really passionate about is taking business sparks or ideas and wrapping energy, resources and people around them to bring them to life and nurture them to be able to develop an energy field of their own. And I guess that probably leads into the other businesses that have been created as a part of this, which, as Chanel referred to before, we've just started up Savoury. The Whole Story's become a savoury hub. So being able to take on the responsibility to be able to bring that work and that thinking around holistic management, and then how we actually look at outcomes in ecosystems to be able to support the farmers that we work with. Also through that work, I'm lucky I get to work with both of the O'Sullivans in different fields, because, and he's not here to hear it, but I said the Three Sisters plots, right? So The Whole Story is actually 3 women. The Whole Story Savoury Hub is 3 women. I don't know where I went wrong with Solea, so we've just started up a business called Solea, which is focused around integrated energy in the agricultural space and solutions for farms. And so I get to work with Dave and Dunstan there, my other 3 sister group, in actually looking at how we look at integrated energy systems on farms. So that's our newest baby, I guess. And yeah, it's actually putting just these sparks of business ideas and wrapping the right teams of people, connections, resources around them and bringing them to life. So that's, I guess, my life's passion and work. So I'm really grateful to be here. I know there's many business sparks and ideas and ways that we can support people here. I'm not sure how much more I can do, but if I can also support others who have a passion in this space of bringing things to life, then reach out and please, well, I'll always try and support you to make it happen. Do you have anything you want to say?
Hi everyone, my name's David O'Sullivan. So I'll come from a bit of a different angle. I had the privilege of starting here with Jeff and Justine when they first bought this place. So it was totally different from what you see today. I think the first day I came, there was trucks and diggers down in this here developing this. All this turning circle wasn't done, it was just a traditional drive-through. It was really much a traditional sheep and beef farm that had minimal returns and not a lot of vision, and it needed a lot of work and development. So that was really the early stages of developing this place. But the greatest privilege, I think, for working for Jeff and Justine was their vision and their marketing and branding background, and bringing that to a farm. That Farming New Zealand really hadn't seen that stuff, and yep, some of it doesn't go down so well. But what they started asking the questions of why do we have a chemical rep from PGGW come out and tell us what we need to spray in our paddocks and then supply the chemical? Why do we have a fertiliser rep come out and tell us what our fertiliser needs and then he supplies the fertiliser? Like, really? We've been doing this forever, but that's just because what everyone done. So early stages of development, we were putting in water. There's a centre pivot down there. There was multiple new houses, new cattle yards, a new house over here where we lived. That's a cool story. That centre pivot down there has water that comes up from this valley over here. It also was a project that Jeff and myself worked on. So that has water coming down there. It has more than enough head that it needs to run that. It runs without diesel. We didn't want to go down with diesel because of it didn't fit with the values of the property, and it was about the best part of 80k to put in a mains line. So through Carfield's irrigation, they had a system that powered itself through a water turbine. So that comes down and it self-propels that. I believe that's still how it works. Self-propels that. There was more energy in the system than it needed. So then we were building another house for the farm manager. You can't quite see it, not far from there. So at the same time, we then put a pipe, a 100mm pipe that went and fed the excess head of the system over to the house and fed it through 2 hydrospout turbines, which creates power in the winter when they aren't irrigating, and then in summer that house feeds off solar. So that was just a creative way. So then, what was I going to talk about? So really, the really interesting part of working with Jeff and Justine was their branding. They brought their branding and marketing angle to farming. So it was looking at, instead of just traditional farming, producing a lamb or beef and selling it at the gate to the rep, it was actually understanding what the high-end consumer wanted. Not worrying about what you were told they think they need. They spent the time, yes, they were fortunate to have me and Jack on site and they could do that, but finding out what the high-end consumer wanted. And at that time, it was the early stages of people wanted food and fibre that had a story behind it that was above average, probably above sustainable. So it was going above and beyond with animal welfare, above and beyond with the environmental work we were doing in regenerative agriculture. So we got away from synthetic fertilisers, away from chemicals, really hammered in, got stuck into the multi-species regen side of farming. And then diversity, which I would say a lot, and even properties that we know around where we live aren't really diversifying as much as they could. Whereas this place, that was all we talked about, was diversity. They've got cabins, they've got a wedding site down here, they do hunting, they do bike trails, they do farm tours. I mean, it's just like a supermarket. You don't go in and buy bread from your supermarket. And supermarkets are licensed to print money. and this is what this place does really, really well. So diversity. So that was a really interesting opportunity here for the Rosses. So we helped develop this place, and then we went to another regenerative role with a Chinese man down in Glenorchy, where I met Karma. Yeah, who helped come up with a design for one of the properties in Glenorchy. And then rolls on to where we are now, and Chanel talked about it. So we then had the opportunity to buy a block of land for ourselves, and which we are then putting all of these things we've learnt here. I think Beck said that you can take a boy away from LHS, but he's still going to paint his posts black, which we are doing all around our property. And so many things that we learnt here we're doing on our own place. So that's my story.
All right, hopefully this isn't too cheesy, but if everyone puts their hands up, yeah, and then put them down if you haven't heard about Minecraft. Okay, so you can put them down now. So it's a really interesting piece of technology that exists in the world. I think, New Zealand is going to come into a new sense of that with the Minecraft movie coming out, and I'm not sure if people saw, but New Zealand's going to be this world in the Minecraft space. It's also free in schools, across New Zealand to right through to 2027. And what I've been trying to explore over the last couple of years, which has been actually inspired in Taranaki, is how do we sort of reimagine a better world and get the next generation building that and then engaging with that in real life. So I, from Taranaki, heard of Eve Kawai-Brown talking about the branching out strategy and diversifying away from dairy into things like garlic. And I was like, okay, we're just going to start off with this game. Vampires are going to be attacking the school. The kids have to run out, learn how to grow the garlic, come back and defeat the vampires. And I went and told the teachers about this, and they said, that's not happening in my classroom. But it's, managed us to evolve what we're working on. And at its very essence, you kind of have to look at every block, right, in Minecraft and check that block, the soil is healthy, the inputs are good, it's a regenerative system. And we're able to start teaching that, and everyone can kind of look after, block by block and build a better Aotearoa. We started off with a company, I called it WITS, but there's Western Institute of Technology, and they said, well, you can't have that name. So I pivoted to Farmcraft, and then it sounded too much like Minecraft, so we've called it Craft. Food, fibres and factories, how do we potentially move away from primary industries and think about where we can do things smarter? And I think what's really interesting, every conversation we have here is there's a story which we can tell and then portray in a world which the next generation really understands, and they can sort of interact with that. And in Taranaki, in 40 schools, they're growing garlic in classroom, right? So we can get the kids excited about something on the computer and then take them out to the real world where they can actually get stuck in and start doing something. So we're working on our first game coming out, and then got this mission to try and build 50 games which are aligned with all of the numeracy and literacy parts of the curriculum, starting with 10-year-olds before they get to high school, where it's kind of like too structured, and then hopefully we can just grow and build on that as everyone sort of grows up and makes it better. So yeah.
Does everybody want to stand up and have a bit of a stretch before we carry on? Yeah. Whoa!
If you get a chance, guys, ask Alex about Kinna Creek.
Kia ora. So I'm James Samuel. I've spent the last 20 years being a generalist in the food system, specifically because I noticed that the industrial food system isn't working. It's killing us slowly, and its time is done. And so I've been looking at and supporting lots of different initiatives around how to help people to develop different aspects of local food systems. I co-founded Ubi, if anybody's heard. Who's heard of Ubi? Oh yeah, a whole bunch of you, great. So local food distribution business. And I brought various people into the country and done tours with them to promote local food production. And this time last year, my partner and I, Janet, held a syntropic agroforestry and social systems 3-day training down up in Golden Bay. I forget where I am sometimes. I've been moving around so much. And yeah, what grew out of that was recognizing that there's a need, and it comes back to something you said right at the beginning, Zeb, which was that we need to reverse this trend from rural to urban and get more people back onto the land. Anna, thank you. And one of the pieces that is difficult about that, it's like there are a lot of farmers and people who own land who want more people on their land, and there are a lot of people who have, for example, built themselves a tiny house, right? So they've gone, well, the real estate market is crazy and insane. You know, I'm not going to spend my whole life working at some job I don't like in order to pay off a suburban house, so I'll build a house. So, you know, those people have already made a significant step in the right direction. How do we match them? How do we bring them together? And I think, well, I haven't yet found anybody who disagrees that when people come together, there's often a romance, there's a lot of good energy and a lot of great thoughts about what they're going to do, and then something happens and kaboom, it blows apart. Yeah. So my partner Janet has a huge amount of skill in helping people to build communication bridges. Now, she does 2-day trainings called Building Communication Bridges Inside and Out. And what we came up with was a framework for helping people to develop the foundations of healthy collaboration. So first of all, is there a shared intention? Yeah? Because if there isn't a shared intention, then don't start. But if there is one, then declare it, write it down, like put it somewhere where you can see it, because that's going to be so pivotal in terms of keeping you going when other things don't go so well. The second piece is agreements. You know, what are the agreements by which you operate? And it doesn't have to be a legal agreement. It just has to have enough of the clarity so you both know where you're going. Yeah, and it can be changed by agreement. Yeah, so that's intention and agreements. The third piece is, what are the communication processes that you're going to use to navigate the daily interactions? You know, how do you decide what's the next most important piece of work on the farm, for example? How do you decide how you're going to do it? Like, what's the implementation? So there are processes that can be used, and this is what we experimented with, well, that we introduced to the 35 people who came to the Syntropic Agroforestry and Social Systems workshop this time last year, is we had suddenly 35 people who were living on site. Everybody was camping there, and so we had this opportunity to hold space for a community and figure out how we do this decision-making process, for example. And then there's the skills, the communication skills themselves, and that's something which is potentially a lifetime journey, but there are some essential skills that can be learned relatively quickly. So if you have the intention, the agreements, the processes and the skills, I believe that we can create some very important, valuable and nourishing collaborations that support people to come together on the land. Yeah, so that's the piece that I'm working on. Thank you.
Nice, yeah, well you all know me by now, but I thought I'd take up like the final 5 minutes, and timing wise this has just been perfect. Shout everybody. But I did want to just introduce myself in a new hat. Firstly, I wanted to just mihi to the Ross family who have allowed us and welcomed us here. They're not here in the circle, they've sort of been represented by the canine part of the family so far, but actually it was through the relationship with Finn, who's just like an absolute future leader. Started the group Future Farmers, or a few of us in the circle are a part of. And we gathered here down in Dave and Chanel's old house for the first time and started coming up with this idea of a sort of like manifesto of what the youth could look like, and we'll hear a bit more about that in the morning, but that was the sort of birth with sort of my relationship with the family. And so yeah, Finn and I kind of conspired about holding Future Whenua Summit this year, but then he got selected for the Wapiti ballot, so of course he can't make it here, because you know, you got to say yes to such things. Jeff also just away, but he is going to be here tomorrow, so you'll hear a bit from him. Cool. And yeah, Jussie's actually up there, but she's recently had surgery, so yeah, just welcome you to like send some healing energy her way. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about a new role. I've recently shifted up to the North Island, which I thought would never happen. I've sort of grew up with generational roots in Southland, and I just so love Murihiku Southland, and like that was where my people were and everything. And just like, you know, you plant a food forest and you start to see it to bear fruit, you imagine that being a lifetime thing. And yeah, just I guess I just had to really step into that observation, and I was kind of ignoring some real like red flags turning into and because of I was just like set in like the vision of transforming the Montana flat into this certain thing. But then when I really stepped back and actually allowed myself to observe, I realized I was trying to impose a vision where it wasn't quite welcome. And then yeah, so that was one piece. And then yeah, just the Biome Trust, which have supported Future Whenua Summit in a couple of years, formed a relationship and got an invitation to move up there. And I just wanted to talk about that in a couple of reasons. It's a property similar to this. The owners have come from non-farming backgrounds, meaning they've had a bit of capital to put into the land to sort of kickstart the regenerative process. And yeah, I don't think they really like telling that part of the story, because it's like more wanting to prove that the regenerative model meets the economic expectations of like our current time. But I actually think there's a huge potential in that narrative. And like, I don't know if anyone's seen the what's it called, the country calendar from here. It was the most watched one of all time, the Lake Hawea Station edition, and it was kind of like notorious, and like it just had this huge backlash from all the like farmers saying, oh, you're playing Beethoven to the sheep in the wool shed, like, well, you can't do that, mattresses down the board. And for whatever reason, like the sort of, you know, the digital pitchforks came out after that episode. And then there was this other backlash of just like New Zealand culture in general and other aspects of the farming sector that sort of wanted to meet that and be like, yeah, you know, what's going on? They're trying to do the best job possible with their land. Why are you up in arms about that? And so there is this thing about like outsiders and who are they to tell us how to farm when they've come from selling vodka and this sort of thing. But I really think as a farming community, there should be a welcome for people to enter in. You know, we should be saying, come in here with your wealth and your marketing expertise and your ability to coordinate teams of heaps of people, which is sort of the context of Mangaroa. And so I think that's one of the things that we're able to export, as well as being able to innovate rapidly. And you know, there's capital to sort of hire me as a chief regenerative officer. You know, a lot of farms don't have that liberty, but then now I'm able to sort of apply some of the things I've been harvesting and actually plant a permaculture orchard. And you know, there's 80,000 native plants in gullies and along stream sides and stuff like this that yeah, often farms with like the sort of debt paradigms that we're mostly constrained by can't actually achieve. So yeah, that's one of the things that we're able to export at Mangaroa, and yeah, haven't got the final confirmation, but I do think that I could plant a seed here that might be where we're hosting Future Whenua Summit next year. So yeah, keep your eyes out for that. And yeah, nice. And yeah, I think another thing that a learning of mine that I wasn't expecting from going up there, and I don't know if this is like a lifelong move or if I'm going up there to harvest some more about what it is to like farm in community and like deal with different sort of resources and bring that home to Montana Flat. The future is untold. But what I have sort of learned was stepping away from being in a position leading towards farm ownership and then moving into being a worker, and how actually really liberating that is. And I guess I share that because I feel like there's a resistance from people in urban centers entering the farming scene because the journey, the outcome that we're seeking is farm ownership. So you get into farming because you want to own a farm. And from me going the other direction and just feeling so good, actually, like I've gone into this like real clear pathway, not that clear because farm succession is really difficult and I've got siblings, but there was a pathway towards farm ownership. And now I've stepped into a place where I'll never own Mangaroa farms, but I'm able to just be there as an employee and a servant to a land that's like not mine to own. And then I'm starting to really question the whole dynamic about owning the land and starting to listen more and more to like the Māori way of thinking around that, and other cultures around the world who have never thought that the earth, our mother, is something you can own. We're merely here to serve and to caretake. And I think that's just like something that I wasn't expected to learn, but that's become really clear to me, and that I'd like people perhaps in urban centers or perhaps thinking of a career and just, you know, I see it, but I don't see how I could end up owning a farm by doing that. I'll have to make all my money through corporate whatever and then go in. And it's like, no, we can start serving now and release that sort of expectation that we need to own the land. So that was just something I wanted to add into this little circle. Nice. I think we're pretty bang on one, which is awesome because that's what we expected. We've got a nice long lunch, like an hour and a half. I was thinking it might be a sunny day and that could be an excuse to like get down to Johns Creek and go for a swim. But we also ordered this nice cloud because we didn't want to be sun. So yeah, nature heard the call. So if you want to go for a walk and explore, you're welcome to do that. We've got a hangi cooking. Feel free to go and look at that process. Cheers to Seb, who's holding the fort down there. Otherwise, yeah, let's just get down to the loom. Helena might want to introduce the food. And yeah, we've got a nice long talk and we'll be back here at 2:30.